describing somebody that's overacting, right? And obviously so. And that turns into a sort of, I kind of want to call it like an ick, like a cringe
Yeah.
moment. You're just
Yeah.
like, oh boy, like I've got to watch this. It's kind of like when your kid's on stage for the first time.
Hey guys, welcome to the Levelin Up podcast with Brigham Blackham. I have another great guest. This is Jake Thompson, one of my good friends. We were actually actors together, and that's how we first came to know each other, but now both in business. And I'm so grateful to be able to have an opportunity to talk with him a little bit more about storytelling and how your story and the way that you share your story is actually going to be helping or hindering your business. Because you think about it, if you don't know how to share your story, it could be killing your business. So is your story killing your business? Now we're going to start off hearing a little bit more about his backstory in business and a little bit more about his experience with storytelling. And then we're going to dive in and just have a great conversation. How you doing today, Jake?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, Brigham.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell us a little bit about your background, backstory with not just short-term rentals. I know you do that management side, but tell us a little bit about just your overall backstory.
Yeah. So, I was a dewy-eyed entrepreneur wannabe in college and I, made a lot of strivings, a lot of efforts, I guess you could call them, to try to break into the industry of business building. And so that's kind of what I've always loved doing. When I was going to school, I made sure to gain a useful skill set for businesses in the tech space. And so that's where I ended up landing. That's where I started out of school. And from there, I've just tried to develop a unique skill set that allows me to start businesses really quickly, to get them to profitability as quickly as I can, and then decide whether or not I'm going to keep running with those, or if I'm going to turn it off, or I'm going to sell. And so that's kind of what I'm doing right now, is I'm just, in and out of these different businesses and trying to make cool stuff take off, right? Try to own some things and try to make some profitable ventures become a great asset to the people that are involved in them. So that's a really, really quick background ID for me.
No worries. Really quick, tell us a little bit about your experience with Air Incubator. I know that you do some short-term rental management in the past. I would love to hear your experience on that as well, because we love to talk about real estate. We also love to talk about business. So you're like perfect getting both sides of that. Go ahead.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so Air Incubator was a small venture that, I started, I'm going to say, a little over a year ago, and the whole premise behind it was, can I turn some of the short-term rental stuff that I've been doing into sort of a consulting management type of agency business? And it went pretty well. For the first 8 months, we were able to turn over, I think, about $20,000, and that's completely organic, right? And so for somebody that's never done this before, for somebody that's just writing on LinkedIn every day, I feel like that was a pretty good starting point for Air Incubator. But so the premise behind it was, is there a way to productize a little bit the experience of being a short-term rental vacation rental manager and operator? Can we produce some resources for people? Can we turn that into a sort of a coaching type of play? And can we replicate some of the success that we've been having as operators for luxury vacation rentals and even non-luxury vacation rentals? And then turn that into something that's of value to people that are trying to break into the space, or people that are already in the space and want to see better results coming out of their short-term rentals.
I love it. And you've been creating some info products with that and the consulting side. So it's not just, hey, here's some ideas. It's here's some tactical, practical things that I'm using in my operations that might be helpful for you. And you said you did 20,000 gross in your first year doing that. Is that right?
The first few months, yeah. So we were
That's
able,
awesome.
yeah. So, there was a real need for this kind of thing, at least, during the time that I was really fully invested in it. There was a strong need for it. But and it was interesting that it all really came together because you could tell that story, right? The story of the business. And you kind of alluded to that a little bit. So yeah, that's I see those two going hand in hand really, really well.
Yeah, I love it. So let's actually dive into story because I know where we met was actually not in a business context. We're uh we were actors in a play together. So tell us a little bit about your experience with storytelling from the business side in comparison to the storytelling side as an actor. Love to play with that little juxtaposition.
Yeah. So let's see. Brigham, you have to remind me what play we performed in together. Was
Oh,
it Christmas Carol or Footloose or
Christmas
what was it?
Carol, and I
It
think we
was
also had one more. One second. What was it? Was it West Side Story? Were you in West Side Story with me as well?
was that with
At the
Ange
Sierra?
and yeah, was that on this on the Shell stage?
Yeah, on the shell.
Oh man,
That was a few years
what a
ago.
memory with that. That was a
That was
while ago,
actually that was
man.
over a decade ago, wasn't it?
Mm.
Yeah,
I don't
that
know if it was that long. I can't
maybe it
remember.
wasn't quite
Like
that long ago, but
I'm in my 30s now, so I can't remember anything. Everything is long ago now. Yeah, so man, I loved performing on the stage, and one of the reasons why I like performing on the stage is because it's a real crash course in true salesmanship.
Hmm,
Because when you're on the stage, you have to you don't actually tell a story like you would expect to tell a story at a bedtime scenario, right? You're not sitting down saying once upon a time, and then diving into a narrative. What you're doing is you've become a piece, a cog in a machine, right? And now you're trying to convey an emotional thing, right? And you're trying to elicit an emotional response from the audience while playing a part of a whole. And that's a little bit more, in my opinion, like sales and trying to get people to buy into something that you're trying to sell a lot more than say something like, like telling a bedtime story where you're trying to, go from A to B and you're completely verbal and you're not necessarily trying to elicit an emotional response. Maybe you're trying to calm the kid down, if they're trying to go to bed or whatever.
right.
And so when people think of storytelling, when I think of storytelling, especially on the stage, I don't necessarily think of, or in business, I don't necessarily think of, okay, how am I going to tell the journey of my business, right? What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to elicit an emotional response or some sort of I'll just leave it at that. Some sort of emotional response from the person that you're talking to using the experience of the user and the customer and the business kind of working together to achieve some sort of hero's journey, right? To arrive at a hero's journey. And so they say that, in books that I really like Oversubscribed by Dan Priestley and others, they talk about how you got to look at the customer. Maybe I'm mixing books up here. I read that one pretty recently, and so that's why I'm excited about it. But you've got to treat your customer, the person you're selling to, like a hero,
Right.
right? And your hero is going to go through this journey, and your hero is going to arrive to some place. But as they go along that route, and as they see themselves as the hero, if you're trying to sell them something, if you're trying to give them something, you're trying to give them something that's going to help them to be successful at being the hero in their journey. And your goal is not to say, I'm the hero, I'm the protagonist. Your goal is to say, I'm a piece of your journey, right? I'm an actor in the play of your story, right? And I'm trying to elicit an emotional response from you to get you to see that I can help you. I'm the wise old man in the cloak in the corner, right, of the tavern that's going to help you to get through all the trials that you're going to run into as you grow into whatever business that you're doing.
I love that answer.
So that's the angle that we take in storytelling on the stage, and that's the angle that you should take in storytelling in business.
That was a great answer. And one of the things that popped up with this is as you have your customer be the hero of their own story, and you're a cog, as you said, in that story. You're not the story. You are just part of it.
Mhm.
You provide the talismans or you provide the different things that will help them achieve their goals. One of the things that my mentor Greg Kimball says, he says if you have someone that starts giving you advice or saying, "Hey, you need to do this," before they find out what you want to do, that's kind of like taking Frodo, who wants to go take that ring to Mordor, and saying, "Hey, do you want a bow and arrow?" And you're like, "Is that going to help me get to where I want to go?" You're like, "Okay." "Oh, how about a boat?" You're like, "Wait a second, this is not actually helping me in my journey." We have to understand as business owners that there are goals that our customers have, They have that overarching, that super objective. And if we can tap into helping them get closer to that super objective, the real thing that they want in life, in business, then we can give them anything that will help them on that way. And if they want it, great. You have that open hand, they have that transaction, it's fantastic. But if we if we give them something that doesn't actually serve them, then we're just being a douchey salesman. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, it kind
let's
of reminds me of that Hercules character, the Disney movie Hercules.
yeah, it
And they're
does.
walking through that city, and that kind of crusty guy walks up and he's like, "Hey, you want to buy a sundial?"
Yes,
Yeah, it's just
exactly.
kind of that pushy sales, that kind of, I'm looking out for me and I'm trying to convince you. And that's kind of the key word, is that if you have to convince somebody, right, you've kind of already lost in a
Yeah.
way, right? Because your job's not to convince them per se. Their job is to convince themselves. You're just trying to show them their reality back to them. You're reflecting the nature of the situation. And again, there's that play actor's angle,
Yeah.
right?
I love
Um,
that. Well, in acting, we hold up a mirror to life. We are not life, but we hold up a mirror to life. And one of the things that I think is really helpful in storytelling is when that audience can see themselves as if they're looking in the mirror, see themselves in the story. Because if they don't see themselves in the story that you're weaving with them, they will never purchase. There's just no way, because there's no emotional connection, and people buy based on emotion, based on that motion that makes them want to go do something. They see that whatever it is that you give, product or service, is going to help them get closer to their super objective, that thing that they want more than anything else. If they don't see that, they don't see that mirror, there's no way they're going to do it. Right? So let's talk about this. I think you have a unique perspective of being a musician as well. Is there anything, as far as the dynamics of storytelling, that that you've seen as far as a correlation between music and musicality and storytelling?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you think about it, all of the great forms of art that have ever existed are just forms of storytelling, and then that includes instrument. And it's hard to tell what came first. Was it the grunts, of the caveman telling stories around a fire, or maybe not, or was it us banging rocks together and noticing a rhythm? It may have been the instrument first, but the thing that gave the instrument meaning probably was the idea that there was a story behind it, right? Or there was a relived experience to be had behind it. So I'm not going to go too deep down there because I'm not qualified and I have no idea what came first, right? Chicken or the egg.
Sure.
But playing an instrument and or singing on stage using your voice as an instrument, right? That's just a form of storytelling, right? And we pick up on it as humans because we like patterns and we like pattern recognition, right? And the patterns that we experience in music are really beautiful and repetitive, and there's a lot of amazing studies that go into why do human beings appreciate music the way that they do. But my theory is that the reason why we like music so much is because it's the thing that sets a backdrop for us to relive experiences, or to relive often our own pain and suffering, and then have that kind of replay in our brains a little bit in a sort of nostalgic phenomena. And so for me, music is just another form of storytelling.
Yeah.
And if you're not trying to elicit an emotional response by how you play music, then what are you even doing? You know,
Mm.
Music, is meant to be an emotional driver. It's meant to also be a way to clear your head, and it's meant to be the thing that kind of helps reset a perspective in a way. At least that's how I've always experienced music. And that's why I like listening to music in the car on long trips. That's why I like plugging my headphones in when I'm at the gym, because then I can play myself a story that helps me to revamp my identity, right? As the gym bro that's going to lift, whatever he's going to lift right now.
Sure.
And that motivates you, right? Like you wonder, why am I so motivated by the fact that I'm, blasting, um, you know, Taylor Swift right now. Why does that make me want to, bench 300 pounds or whatever? And I'm not a Swiftie, I mean, Taylor Swift's whatever. My daughter and my wife are more in that kind of vein, but I like using Taylor Swift for all examples because she's a really great storyteller in her music.
I think this is something that pops up over and over, is that there are multiple tracks to our story, or there's multiple layers. I've been editing different videos recently, and you think about it, we have a sound track, we have an audio track that is maybe specifically for sound effects, and then you have different elements with your visuals. And in life, every single experience we have, guys, hear this, every single experience that you have is something that will either highlight your story or blend it into the background. And it's only when you have something punctuating that is important. You actually reflect and you ponder for a moment. You're like, all right, is this something that's going to change me? Am I going to let this go through me, or is it just going to be something that happened to me? And I was talking with my wife yesterday, and we talked about this idea of things going through us. The difference between a great actor and an average actor is, does that emotion, does that experience go through you and the audience? Or does it just come to you? Because if it just comes to you, it doesn't change us. Transformative stories in business, on stage, in music, they have to go through you and feel it all the way to the core of your being. If you don't let that happen, then there's almost a facade or a wall that you put up. So I'm going to ask you this, since you've done not just community theater, you've also done professional theater. Let me know, when you're dealing with a brand new actor, have you ever experienced this where they put on their acting voice and they have this wall? Have you ever had someone like that just for some reason or another, they get on stage and they totally are different, and they have this wall or this facade that they put up rather than be real? You ever had that experience?
Oh yeah, I mean, I've had that experience because I've been that guy and continue to be that guy all the time. And I like have to step back and wonder, what am I doing? But yeah. I mean, the acting voice comes out, right? Describing somebody that's overacting, right, and obviously so, and that turns into a sort of, I kind of want to call it like an ick, like a cringe moment. You're just
Yeah.
like, oh boy, like I've got to watch this. It's kind of like when your kid's on stage for the first time. I mean, you love to see it, right? But if anybody asked you, was this professional grade, you'd be like, no, like, of course not. Because there's a maturity that has to happen, I think, in your soul for real acting to be real, and that maturity is often won through pain, which I think is a real thing, right? And hopefully it's also won through tender moments of happiness and light and goodness.
Mm-hmm.
And then once you have that real life experience, then trying to replicate that for somebody else, right? And that's the key phrase, for someone else, right? That changes how you behave on the stage. And I think that's kind of what, that's what storytelling is all about. I like how you described it, right? It's going through somebody. And I thought, as you were describing it that way, the way that I measure whether or not that happened is usually by what do they do immediately after? You know what I mean? Like, and I don't mean that to say like, well, if you go get ice cream after a show, then you clearly didn't get the message. I don't mean that. I mean that, is there some sort of reflection in what you felt in the actions you then take thereafter, right? Or in the perspective that you hold afterwards and how you treat other people. One great example of that does come from A Christmas Carol, right? The story of Scrooge. Every time I watch that show, I come away from it wanting to be more charitable. And that wanting is an action, right? I want to be more charitable. And sometimes it's not even just being more charitable. Sometimes I want to be reflective of my own greed. And that's a little bit different than wanting to be charitable. I want to be pensive, and I want to be, I want to think, okay, are there ways in which I'm being the version of Scrooge that we met at the very beginning, and I didn't even realize it? Right. And when you turn your experience into some kind of action, whether it just be thought, whether it just be feel, whether that just be literally stand up, walk out of the theater and go do something awesome, right? That's how you know that the story that you just watched was performed by actors who were trying to give you something and let it pass through you versus trying to perform at you, right? And convince you of how amazing of a storyteller they are rather than trying to let the story stand on its own 2 feet.
Oh man, that just reminded me of an experience with Daniel Hess. I'm sure you've probably met him before. He said, "Give a gift to your audience." This is the first time they have ever seen this story for many of them, and maybe the last or only time they'll ever experience it in your life. So give a gift to your audience. When we think of business, are we giving that gift in a way that is presented that's beautiful, or is it like ugly? I gave this example as a missionary at a district meeting. You ready there? Ready for this? Okay. No. Uh,
Oh
we
boy.
took this, oh boy, oh man,
Let's hear it.
young 19, 20-year-olds just doing stupid stuff. I wanted them to get this point. So we took a cake, right? A piece of cake, and we're like, "Hey, do you want a piece of cake?" And we asked the missionary, like, "Yeah, I'll take a piece of cake." "Great, yeah, you want a piece of cake?" And we're like, "All right, here you go." And we delivered it on a beautiful little dish. It was awesome. And he was like, "Oh, man, that was really good. That was presented very well. And it tastes amazing." And then we asked somebody else, like, "Hey, do you want a piece of cake?" And they're like, yeah, I'd like a piece of cake after what happened there. For no problem." And then what we did was, instead of putting it on a plate, we grabbed it, we threw it at him. And he's like, "Whoa, whoa, what the heck?" And then we went to the next person. Do you want a piece of cake?" And they're like, "No, no, no, thanks." Like, well, but the cake tastes the same. It's the same gospel. It's the same message. The ingredients are the same. It's actually done really well. But the presentation of that story changes the emotion. And I think that's the difference between a great actor providing like a Shakespearean play and experience, and you're like, "Oh my gosh, I got it. I felt it. It went through me." And then like a high school kid that has never done it, that just barely got the lines and they are fumbling over everything. That's that grabbing the cake and throwing it at the audience. There's no going through. It's just hitting you and you're like, "Oh, I feel so bad that I came today." So let's talk about this a little bit more. How does presentation of your story matter in business and in acting?
So I have to laugh at that. You threw cake at your missionaries?
Oh yeah. I mean,
Oh
it didn't have a
man.
lot of frosting on it, so it wasn't a big deal. And
Okay, good.
we
Yeah,
chose
hopefully you
we
had a
had a
good
very
relationship
playful
with that.
group. It was a good relationship.
Yeah, man. The goofy things we do to try to get, really deep and meaningful points across.
Mhm.
I have to laugh at that because like it reminds me of things that I did that stuck with the missionaries that I worked with, and years later they talked to me about remember when you did this? And sometimes it's not good. Sometimes it's like, "Oh, yeah, I remember that." And they're
Right.
like, "I hated that," like, or "It ruined my mission," or what. Anyway, I won't go down that road because hopefully not too many of us returned missionaries have had that experience. But maybe leader missionaries can relate a little bit more.
For sure.
Yeah, so repeat the question again for me. I'm sorry. I kind of
How does
lost it there.
presentation, in your experience, how does presentation of your story in business and acting,
Hmm.
how does that actually help you get the message across positively or negatively?
Yeah. So, I mean, if you want to dip into STRs a little bit, I
Yeah,
have some
let's do it.
examples from this space. The one of the things that I realized that I was pretty good at early on in the business, right? I started with $800 in a single bedroom, and we grew that into multiple properties, a luxury property, and management of luxury properties all over Houston. And that experience, um, the going through the experience of talking to people that have very unique and often very demanding expectations of you, right? As a host in a short-term rental business, you had to learn how to really move with the punches, so to speak, right? And something I realized that I was good at that was that I was really good at presenting information and presenting, including bad information, like negative information to people in a way that actually made it sound more like an opportunity rather than a negativity, right? And I think that's what allowed me to maintain such lofty reviews. We maintained a 5-star average review across 500 stays. And that's pretty hard to do. But one of the reasons we were able to pull it off, it wasn't just about, making sure there were enough towels in the bathroom. It was also about when somebody came to me and said, oh my gosh, like there are literally no restaurants nearby. How am I gonna, I need to get some food or whatever, and I don't know how to get food. There's no restaurants nearby, and no one's delivering, and we're feeling sick, and no one knows where this is. Like they would have these problems, and oftentimes they were things that were kind of outside of our control, right? Or were kind of negative or whatever.
Mhm.
When you have those instances, some hosts would respond with, "Oh, I'm so sorry," or like, "Yeah, that sucks, man. Like that's just how this neighborhood is. Sorry." But if you're an operationalist, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to note that this is a problem that didn't have a solution already built into your system, right? And so you'll say, okay, maybe my guest book needs to include a blurb on this, or maybe my intro messages or my know before you go section needs to include, hey, just keep in mind that food delivery does not happen at this location, right? It's too far away. It's in the mountains of Georgia. They're not going to find it. It's really, really difficult to get to. Then that's just the reality. So don't come here expecting to order a Domino's pizza and get it delivered to the door. It's not going to happen. And I didn't include that before, but now I see there was a way to more efficiently operationalize, right? So that was step one. But step two was responding to this person, right? And in step two, I could have said, like anybody else would say, yeah, that kind of sucks or whatever. But instead, I started to offer opportunities to people. And opportunities are in the form of choices, or in the form of additional options, or in the form of recommending a different framework, a different mindset to have about the situation, right? And I can't recall exactly what I said to the guest that brought up the fact that they couldn't get delivery sent over. But it was something in the vein of, oh, well, we actually have some hot dogs in storage. Do you want to stick this on a stick and take it outside? We've got some grilling stuff that you guys can use out there, and that you can have a good experience from that, right? Or it was something like, oh, I'm so sorry. Should I call a neighbor that we have that is willing to help us out? Can they bring you some food? I understand you have a sick family member and you don't want to go out. So having the mindset of how can I deliver, or how can I give them an opportunity to see this in a new light. That to me is the type of thing you're talking about, right? We're trying to present information. We're trying to present the reality in a new way with a new perspective. The delivery of how you do it is actually going to matter tremendously. And so the fact that I was giving options, the fact that I was maybe apologetic enough of the situation because I didn't have it operationalized, I didn't have that information in my guidebook or guest book or whatever, you know, that goes a long, long way to help people to not see you as some sort of evil landlord monster that's just trying to siphon money from them, but you're actually trying to provide an experience for them.
Man, I think one of the other elements to this as well, that was brilliantly brought up, by the way, Jake, is gratitude for the new opportunity. Sometimes we have these people that like, hey, here's a complaint about the property. You're like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. I didn't realize that was a challenge, and now I can make a difference for all of my future guests. Thank you so much. Like that's one of the ways I love to frame those types of complaints. If it's something that I've never heard before, I want to make sure that that guest knows how much I appreciate that feedback. Because if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't have that knowledge that we need to fix this little operational issue. And I love the way you take a quick reframe. When you have options, that's freedom. In a nutshell, freedom is options. And when you give them multiple options, like, hey, you could be sad that you don't have delivery, or we could do this, get the hot dog situation, or we could go have a neighbor do this. Like you gave them options, and that was freeing for them. You gave them another way to think about the same situation. So that reassociation, especially in this presentation, so helpful. That's a great tip right there. Loved it. All right, and in the last few minutes that we have today, I would love to hear maybe what's another story that you're like, man, this is the crux. Like if you do nothing else in storytelling with business, this is the thing that I want to do to encourage you to go out there and improve your communication or improve your operations. What would be something that you would say is, yeah, what's that encouragement piece Could be a story from your past, could be like an experience, some encouragement.
Yeah, let me take a second to think about that. What is the linchpin of storytelling in
Yes.
business?
In your opinion, right?
Sure. I guess it's really going to depend on the audience that we're talking to, Brigham. But if we're talking to, aspiring entrepreneurs or people that are trying to increase things, I would say that you got to remember that the most important story that you tell is the one you tell yourself, right? And that's pretty cliche. Of course it is. But there's a really important linchpin principle here, I think, that makes it almost impossible for you to tell a good story to anybody else, whether that be a story about who they are and what journey they're going on and how you're going to help them get there, if you haven't convinced yourself of that exact same story, right? Or that you haven't taken the time to actually get yourself to that place. So that's, we often bring up the phrase imposter syndrome,
Mm.
right? To kind of describe what I see as an instance in which we have failed to convince ourselves of the story that we're trying to tell other people, right? About what we can do and who we are and how we're going to help them on their journey. So that is what imposter syndrome is. It's a story that you don't believe about yourself, right? And that means you haven't sold yourself on something. And one of the best ways to sell yourself on the story so that you can sell other people on it is really, it just goes back to being on stage. At the Sierra, we weren't getting paid anything to be there, right? We were just there for the journey, for the ride. One of the best ways to convince yourself of the truthfulness of a story is just to serve people.
Mm.
And then listen to their gratitude, and if they have it, hopefully they do. But as you serve, as you gain experience, doing the thing that you want to be convinced that you can actually do for other people for a price, right? Because you're going to give them a premium experience. That's how you gain that confidence. And I know that it's, again, I'm repackaging a very simple thing in how I'm describing it. Maybe I'm over describing it. But if you haven't garnered the experience that you need to convince yourself that you have something of value to share with somebody else, one of the best solutions to that problem is to serve. And when I say serve, I mean offer to do it for free for others, for yourself, and allow that to kind of turn your mindset into a story of, okay, I have convinced myself that I can do this well, and now I can very confidently tell someone this story, right? And that's what I did with Airbnb. I didn't immediately turn myself into somebody that people should listen to about this, right? And that's a mistake that I think some people make today. I like the mindset of, if you've gone somewhere, you can tell the people before, the people that are behind you, you can tell them where you are today and help the people who are, before, or excuse me, what's the phrase? There's a phrase for it, and I'm trying to bring it up in my mind. Um, when you're,
how you did it, is that what you mean? Like, you're like, hey,
yeah,
the
well, when
people
you're
that
when
have
you're not
already experienced that, that
yeah,
have
when you're not very experienced, then you're writing posts, you're doing podcasts, you're doing YouTube videos or whatever for the people that are just starting, right? While you're still learning from the people that are far ahead of you, right? So there's a humility angle there. So that's another thing that I think that's important to remember is humility.
Yeah.
Because if you have sufficient humility, then you can be honest about saying, I'm trying to tell you a story about how I can be helpful to you in business, and how that help can be worth something of value to you, right? But I'm not so arrogant as to assume that I have all the answers.
Right.
Right. And you can be upfront about that. And you can say, look, I'm only a good help because I'm maybe 2 years ahead of you or 1 year ahead of you. And so because of that, I'm going to price appropriately as if I'm 1 year ahead of you. Whereas somebody who's much, much further ahead would be this expensive. And maybe you don't want that right now. Maybe you just want somebody who's been doing this for a little while, right? To be your guide, to be the person on your hero's journey to help you get to the next step. Right. So that combination, I think, of humility and then really, really, truly trying to gain the experiences you need in order to convince yourself that you have a story worth sharing, and one that's of value. Those two things I would say are the things that you should always remember about storytelling in business, right?
I love it. That's excellent encouragement for even the brand new investor, all the way up to those that have been doing it for a long time. You are good enough, right? You are worthy. Just take that story and start to say, I can do this. I can be of service, right? Every single one of us have had myriads of experiences that you can share a simple little experience of your own, and that could add value to someone's life, because maybe you're only a few steps ahead of someone. You might be miles ahead. You may be like states ahead if you're on a long journey. But the fact that you're willing to leave some breadcrumbs that someone can go and follow, that's being of service. And that's giving a gift to your audience, like Daniel Hess said. But once again, thank you so much, Jake, for being on today. How do people find you online? What is the way that they can continue to connect with you?
Yeah, if they want to find me online, just look me up on LinkedIn today. That's where I spend some time. And so I'm, Jake Thompson on LinkedIn. You'll see, I don't remember if I have Air Incubator on the profile there. It should be on there. But yeah, just come talk to me. Right now I'm focused on helping performing arts studios to, get into a better set of software and help them to operationalize things. So if you know voice teachers, or if you know actors, or if you know people that own educational studios, yoga studios, whatever, point them my way. We're building stuff for them right now, and we're making their lives a heck of a lot easier than they've been. So,
Well, thank you so much, Jake. Guys, hope you love this. Hope you got a lot of value from understanding your story from multiple perspectives. Hope we over delivered today on that promise, and we wanted to make sure that you continue to get some leveling up content. Like and subscribe, hit that notification bell, and have a wonderful day. God bless.